EGIL'S SAGA Skallagrimssonar, EGIL'S SAGA. Chapter 31 of Skallagrim's Children. Skallagrim and Bera had a great many children, but at first they all died. Then they had a son, who was sprinkled with water and named Thorolf. As a child he soon grew to be tall and was fair of countenance. It was the talk of all that he would be just such another as Thorolf Kvöldulfsson, after whom he was named. Thorolf was far beyond children of his own age and strength, and as he grew to manhood he became great in most accomplishments. Thorolf was of a great cheery mood. Early did he come to such full strength as to be deemed fit for warlike service with other men. He was soon a favorite with all, and his father and mother loved him so well. Skallagrim and his wife had 2 daughters. One was named Sayun, the other Thorun. They also were of great promise as they grew. Then Skallagrim and his wife had yet another son. He was sprinkled with water and named, and his name was Egil. But as he grew up, it was soon seen that he would be ill-favored like his father, with black hair. Then, but 3 years old, he was as tall and strong as other boys of 6 or 7. He was soon talkative and word-wise. Somewhat ill to manage was he when at play with other lads. That spring, Ingvar went to Borg, his errand being to bid Skallagrim to a feast at his house. He also named for the party his daughter Bera and Thorolf her son, and any others that Skallagrim liked to bring. Skallagrim promised to come. Ingvar then went home, prepared for the banquet, and had ale brewed. But when the set time came that Skallagrim and Bera should go to the feast, Thorolf made him ready to go with them, and also some housecarls, so that they were 15 in all. Egil told his father that he wished to go. "I am," said he, "as much akin to Ingvar as is Thorolf." "You shall not go," said Skallagrim, "for you know not how to behave yourself in company when there is such drinking. You who are not good to deal with, though you will be sober." Then Skallagrim mounted his horse and rode away, but Egil was ill content with his lot. He went out to the yard and found a draft horse of Skallagrim's, got on its back and rode after Skallagrim's party. No easy way had he over the moor, for he did not know the road, but he kept his eyes on the riders before him when copse or wood were not in the way. And this is to tell of the journey, that late in the evening he came to Swannes, when men sat there a-drinking. He went into the room, but when Ingvar saw Egil, he received him joyfully, and asked why he had come so late. Egil told of his words with Skallagrim. Ingvar made Egil sit by him. The 2 sat opposite Skallagrim and Thorolf. For merriment over their ale they fell to reciting staves. Then Egil recited a stave. "Hasting I came to the hearth fire of Ingvar, right fain so to find him who on heroes bestoweth gold that the heather worm guardeth, thou of the snake's shining treasure, always a generous giver, wilt not then me of 3 winters, doughtier songsmith discover?" Ingvar praised the stave and thanked Egil much therefor, but on the morrow he brought to Egil as a reward for the poem 3 sea snail shells and a duck's egg. And next day at the drinking, Egil recited another stave about his poem's reward. "The wielder of keen biting wound foul gave unto Egil the talker 3 silent dogs of the surf's well, meet for the praise in his poem. He, the skilled guide of the seahorse, knowing to please with a present, gave as forth gift to young Egil, round egg the brook bird's bed bolster. Egil's poetry won him thanks from many men. No more tidings were there of that journey. Egil went home with Skallagrim. Chapter 32 of Lord Brynjolf and Bjorn, his son. There was in Son a lord named Bjorn, a rich man. He dwelt at Iceland. His son was Brynjolf, who was sole heir to all his father's wealth. Brynjolf's sons were Bjorn and Thor. They were young men when what has been just told happened. Bjorn was a great traveller, sometimes on freebooting, sometimes on trading voyages. He was a right doughty man. It so chanced that one summer Bjorn was present at a banquet attended by many. He saw there a fair maiden who pleased him well. He asked of what family she was, and was told that she was sister of Lord Thorolf and was named Thora, with the by-name Lacehand. Bjorn made his suit and asked Thora to wife, but Thora refused his offer, in which they parted. But that same autumn Bjorn took men and went with a cutter well equipped northwards to the firths, and came to Thora's when he was not at home. Bjorn took Thora away, and home with him to Iceland. They too were there for the winter, and Bjorn would fain hold a wedding with her. Brynjolf, his father, ill liked what Bjorn had done. He thought there was dishonour in it, whereas there had been ever this long friendship between Thora and Brynjolf. So far, said he, Bjorn, from your holding a wedding with Thora here in my house without the leave of her brother, she shall be here as well respected as if she were my daughter and your sister, and all had to be as Brynjolf ordered, in his household, whether Bjorn liked it well or not. Brynjolf sent men to Thora to offer him atonement and redress for what Bjorn had done. Thora bade Brynjolf send Thora home. No atonement could there be else. But Bjorn would in no wise let her go away. Through Brynjolf he begged, and so the winter wore on. And when spring came, then Brynjolf and Bjorn were talking one day of their matters. Brynjolf asked what Bjorn meant to do. Bjorn said 'twas likeliest that he should go away out of this land. Most to my mind is it, said he, that you should give me a long ship and crew, and I'll go raiding. No hope is there of this, said Brynjolf, that I shall put in your hands a warship and strong force, for I know not but you will go about just what is against my wish. Why, even now already I have enough trouble from you. A merchant ship I will give you, and wares withal. Go you then southwards to Dublin. That voyage is now most highly spoken of. I will get you a good crew. Bjorn said he would take this as his father willed, so he had a good merchant ship made ready and got men for it. Bjorn now made him ready for this voyage, but was some time about it. But when he was quite ready and a fair wind blew, he embarked on a boat with 12 men and rowed into Ireland, and then they went up to the homestead to see his mother's bower. She was sitting therein with many women. Thora was there. Bjorn said Thora must go with him, and they led her away. But his mother bade that women not dare to let them know this within the hall. Brynjolf, she said, would be in a sad way if he knew it, and this would bring about great mischief between father and son. But Thora's clothes and trinkets were all laid there ready to hand, and Bjorn and his men took all with them. Then they went that night out to their ship, at once hoisted their sail, and sailed out by the Son Sea, and so to the main. They had an ill wind, before which they must need run, and were long tossed about on the main, because they were bent on shunning Norway at all cost. And so it was that one day they were sailing off the east coast of Shetland during a gale, and broke their ship in making land at Mossy. They got out the cargo and went into the town that was there, and carrying with them all their wares, they drew up their ship and repaired damages. Chapter 33. Bjorn goes to Iceland. A little before winter came a ship from the south out of the Orkneys with the tidings that a long ship had come in autumn to those islands, therein with messengers of King Harald, with this errant Earl Sigurd, that the king would have Bjorn Brynjolfsson slain wherever he might be found, and through the winter they stayed at Mossy Town. But in spring, as soon as ever the sea began to calm, Bjorn drew forth his ship, and made him ready with all speed. And when he was ready and got wind, he sailed out to the main. They had a strong breeze, and were but little time out, and they came to the south coast of Iceland. The wind was blowing on the land, then in before them westwards along the coast, and so out to sea. But when they got a shift of wind back again, they sailed for the land. There was not a single man on board who had been to Iceland before. They sailed into a wondrous large firth, the wind bearing them towards its western shore. Landwards nothing was seen but breakers and harbourless shore. Then they stood slantwise across the wind as they might, till a firth lay over against them, into which they sailed, till all the skerries and the surf were past. Then they put in by a ness. An island lay out opposite this, and a deep sound was between them. There they made fast the ship. A bay ran up west of the ness, and above this bay stood a good-sized rocky hill. Bjorn and some men with him got into a boat, Bjorn telling his comrades to beware of saying about their voyage aught that might work them trouble. They rowed to the buildings and found their men to speak to. First they asked where they had come to land. The men told them that this was named Borgarfirth, that the buildings they saw were called Borg, and that the good man was Skallagrim. Bjorn at once remembered about him, and he went to meet Skallagrim, and they all talked together. Skallagrim asked who they were. Bjorn named himself and his father, but Skallagrim knew Brynjolf well, so he offered to Bjorn such help as he needed. This Bjorn accepted thankfully. Then Skallagrim asked what others there were in the ship, persons of rank. Bjorn said there was Thora, Rolf's daughter, sister of Lord Thorir. Skallagrim was right glad for that, and said that it was his bound duty to give to this sister of Thorir, his own foster brother, such help as she needed or he could supply, and he bade her and Bjorn both to his house with all his shipmates. Bjorn accepted this. So the cargo was moved from the ship up to the homestead at Borg. There they set up the booths, but the ship was drawn up into the brook hard by, and where Bjorn's party had their booths is still called Bjorn's home field. Bjorn and his shipmates all took up their abode with Skallagrim, who never had about him fewer than 60 stout fellows. Chapter 34 of Skallagrim and Bjorn. It befell in autumn, when ships had come to Iceland from Norway, that this report came over, how Bjorn had run away with Thora without the consent of her kin, and for that the king had made him an outlaw in Norway. But when Skallagrim got to know this, he called Bjorn to him, and asked how it had been with his marriage. Had it been with the consent of his wife's kin? I never looked for this, said he, in a son of Brynjolf, that I should not know the truth from him. Bjorn answered, Truth only I told you, Grim, and you may not rebuke me for this, though I told you no further than you asked. But now I must own this, which is true, that you have heard truth about this match not being made with the agreement of Thorir, my wife's brother. Then spake Skallagrim in great wrath, How dare you come to meet me? Did you not know what friendship was between me and Thorir? Bjorn answered, I knew that between you two was foster brotherhood and close friendship, but I sought your home because I was driven ashore here, and I knew it would be avail me to shun. Now will it be for you to rule what may lot you shall, but I hope for good from you, as I am of your household. Then came forward Thorolf Skallagrimsson and added many a word, and begged his father not to lay this to Bjorn's charge after once receiving him. Several others spoke to the same end, and so it came that Skallagrim was appeased and said that Thorolf should have his way there. "Take you Bjorn," said he, "and deal with him as may best prove your manhood." Chapter 35. Thorolf Goes Abroad. Thora bare a child in the summer. It was a girl. She was sprinkled with water and named Asgerda. Bera got a woman to look after the girl. Bjorn stayed for the winter with Skallagrim, as did all his shipmates. Thorolf struck up a friendship with Bjorn and was ever in his company. But when spring came and one day Thorolf had a talk with his father and asked him what counsel he would give Bjorn about his winter guest, or what help he would lend him, Grim asked Thorolf what Bjorn had in view. "I think," said Thorolf, "that Bjorn would soon go to Norway if he could be there in peace. Methinks, father, this plan lies before us, that you send men to Norway to offer atonement for Bjorn. Thora will greatly honor your word." Thorolf by his persuasion so managed that Skallagrim yielded and gave men for the outward voyage that summer. These went with the message and tokens to Thora Roldsson, and sought atonement between him and Bjorn. But no sooner did Brynjolf hear this than he too set his whole mind to offer atonement for Bjorn. And the end of this matter was that Thora took atonement for Bjorn, because he saw that it had come to this now that Bjorn had nothing to fear. This Brynjolf got atonement accepted for Bjorn, and Skallagrim's messengers abode with Thora for the winter. In the summer following they went back, and on their coming back in autumn they told their tidings that Bjorn was admitted to atonement in Norway. Bjorn was with Skallagrim for yet a third winter, but next spring he made him ready for departure with his following. And when Bjorn was ready for going, then Bera said she would fain have Asgerda, her foster child, left behind. This Bjorn accepted, and the girl was left behind and brought up with Skallagrim's family. Thorolf, Skallagrim's son, settled to go with Bjorn, and Skallagrim gave him mean for the journey. So he went abroad in the summer with Bjorn. Their voyage went well, and they came off the main into Son Sea. Bjorn then sailed into Son, and thence on home to his father, and Thorolf with him. Brynjolf received them joyfully. Then word was sent to Thora Roldsson, and by Brynjolf set a time for a meeting. To this meeting Bjorn also came. He and Thora there ratified their atonement. Then Thora paid out of hand such property in his house as belonged to Thora, and thereafter Thora and Bjorn were good brothers-in-law and friends. Bjorn then stayed at home at Ireland with Brynjolf, Thorolf also being there in much favor both with father and son. Chapter 36 of Erik Bloodaxe and Thorolf. King Harald long held his residence in Hordaland, at those large estates that he owned, at Outstone, or Ogvald-Ness, or at Afrekstead in Fitjar, or at Seaham in Ligra. But this winter the king was in the north part of the land. Now when Bjorn and Thorolf had but one winter in Norway and spring came, they made ready a ship and gathered men. And in the summer they went raiding eastwards, and came home in the autumn, having won much wealth. But when they returned they heard that King Harald was in Rogaland, and would remain there for the winter. King Harald was beginning to age much and fail in strength, but many of his sons were ready to fill the void. His son Erik Bloodaxe was proven the most able. He was being fostered with Lord Thora Roldsson. The king loved Erik above all his sons, and Thorir was on very good terms with the king. Bjorn and Thorolf, when they came home, went first to Iceland, but afterwards turned their way northwards to visit Lord Thorir at his home. They had a certain ship rowed by 13 or 14 oarsmen on either side, and they had about 30 men with them. This ship they had taken in their summer raiding. It was freshly painted above the sea line and was very beautiful. But when they came to Thorir, they were made welcome and stayed there some time, while the ship, tented over, floated opposite the house. It happened one day that as Thorolf and Bjorn were going down to the ship, they saw that Erik Bloodaxe, the king's son, was there. He went out on the ship and up to the land and stood there looking at the ship. Then said Bjorn to Thorolf, "The king's son admires this ship much. Do you offer it to him as a present? For I know it will help him much with the king if Erik Bloodaxe be on our side. I have heard it said that the king bears a heavy grudge against you for your father's sake." Thorolf said that this would be a good plan. They then went down to the ship, and Thorolf spoke. "You regard our ship carefully, Prince. How do you like it?" "Right well," Erik said. "It is a perfect beauty." "Then I will give it to you," said Thorolf, "if you'll take the present." "Take it I will," said Erik, "and you will deem it but poor payment in return for my friendship, since you'll have it for as long as I live." Bjorn and Thorolf, then talking with Thorir, asked him whether he thought it true that the king bore a heavy grudge against Thorolf. Thorir did not deny that he had heard it was so. "Then I would fain," said Bjorn, "that you should go and plead Thorolf's case before him, for death may be upon us if the king wants it so." The end was that Thorir promised to go to the king and bade them try whether the king's son would go with him. But when Thorolf and Bjorn spoke of this with Erik, he promised his influence with his father as well. After that, Thorolf and Bjorn went their way to Son, but Thorir and Erik, the king's son, set in order the newly given galley and went south to meet the king, and found him in Hordaland. He received them joyfully. They remained there for a while, watching for a fit time to approach the king when he should be in a good mood. Then they opened this matter before the king, and said that a certain man had come named Thorolf, Skallagrim's son. "We would pray you, king, to bear in mind this, that Thorolf has done good for your son, Erik Bloodaxe, and not to make young Thorolf pay for what his father did in avenging his brother." The king answered rather shortly that to him much ill favor and darkness had come from Kveldulf and his sons, and 'twas to be looked for that this Thorolf would be like his kin, bringers of death and destruction and ill omen. "They are all," said he, "overbearing men who know no measure and care not how they affect others." Then Erik took the word. He said that Thorolf had made friends with him and given him a noble present, that ship which they had there. "I have," said he, "promised him my hearty friendship. There will be few to become friends with me if this man get nothing by it. You will not let it be so, father, with him, who has been the first to give me such a treasure." In the end, the king promised them before they parted that Thorolf should be in peace with him. "But I will not," he said, "allow him in my presence. But you, Erik, may allow him to get close to you as you like, but one of two things will happen. Either they will be better to you than they were to me, or you will rue the day you met him and allowed him into your company. I hope it not be the latter." Then went Erik Bloodaxe and Thorir home to the firths. They then sent word to Thorolf how their errand to the king had gone. Thorolf and Bjorn were for that winter with Brynjolf. Many summers they were out raiding, but the winters they spent with Brynjolf, or sometimes with Thorir. Chapter 37. The Journey to Bjarmeland. Erik Bloodaxe now took a share in the realm. He held oversight in Hordaland and the Firths. He took and kept about him a bodyguard, and one spring Erik Bloodaxe made ready to go to Bjarmeland, and chose him much people for that voyage. Thorolf undertook the voyage with Erik, and was in the forecastle of his ship, and he bore his standard. Thorolf was then taller and stronger than other men, and herein like his father. In that expedition befell much tidings. Erik had a great battle by the river Dvina in Bjarmeland, wherein he won the victory. And in that voyage he took Gunhilda, daughter of Ozurtoti, and brought her home with him. Gunhilda was above all women beautiful and shrewd, and of magic cunning. There was great intimacy between Thorolf and Gunhilda. Thorolf ever spent the winters with Erik, the summers in raiding. The next tidings were that Thora, Bjorn's wife, fell sick and died. But some while after Bjorn took him another wife. She was named Olof, the daughter of Erling the wealthy of Oster. They too had a daughter named Gunhilda. There was a man named Thorgir Thornfoot. He dwelt in Fenring of Hordaland at a place called Asker. He had 3 sons, one named Hard, another Bergenund, the third Atli the Short. Bergenund was beyond other men in strength and height, and he was grasping and ungentle. Atli the Short was of small stature, square-built, of sturdy strength. Thorgir was a very rich man, a devoted heathen worshipper, of magic cunning. Had went out freebooting and was seldom at home. Chapter 38. Thorolf comes out to Iceland. Thorolf Skallagrimsson made him ready one summer for a trading voyage. He purposed what he also performed to go to Iceland and to see his father. He had now been long abroad. By this he had got great store of wealth and many good things. When ready for the voyage, he went to King Erik, and at their parting the king delivered to Thorolf an axe, which he said he wished to give to Skallagrim. The axe was snag-horned, large, gold-mounted, the hilt overlaid with silver. It was most valuable and costly. Thorolf went his way as soon as he was ready, and his voyage sped well. He came with his ship into Borgarfirth, and at once hastened home to his father. A right joyful meeting they had. Then Skallagrim went down to Thorolf's ship and had it drawn up, and Thorolf went home to Borg with 12 men. But when he came home, he gave Skallagrim King Erik's greeting, and delivered to him the axe with which the king had sent him. Skallagrim took the axe and held it up, looked at it a while but said nothing. He fixed it up by his seat. It chanced one day in the autumn at Borg that Skallagrim had several oxen driven home, which he meant to slaughter. 2 of these he had led under the house wall, and placed with him heads crossing. He took a large flat stone and pushed it under their necks. Then he went near with the axe, the king's gift axe, and hewed it at the ox both at once, so that he took off the heads of the 2. But the axe smote down on the stone, so that the mouth broke and was rent through all the tempered steel. Skallagrim looked at the edge, said nothing, but went into the fire hall, and mounting to the wall beam, thrust the axe up among the rafters above the door. There it lay in the smoke all winter. But in the spring Thorolf declared that he meant to go abroad that summer. Skallagrim forbade him, saying, "'Tis good to drive home with your wain whole. You have," said he, "gotten great honor by travel, but there is the old saw, many farings, many fortunes. Take you now here as much share of the property as you think will make you a great man, but don't go off." Thorolf said he would make yet one more journey, "And I have," said he, "an urgent errand for the journey, but when I come back next time I shall settle here. But Asgerder, your foster child, shall go out with me to her father. This he bade when I came west." Skallagrim said Thorolf would have his own way. Thereafter Thorolf went to his ship and put it in order, and when all was ready they moved the ship out to Digraness, and it lay there waiting for wind. Then Asgerder went to the ship with him. But before Thorolf left Borg, Skallagrim went and took down from the rafters over the door the axe, the king's broken gift. The haft was now black with smoke, and the blade rusted. Skallagrim looked at the axe's edge. Then he handed it to Thorolf, reciting this stave: "The fierce wood wolf's tooth edge hath flaws not a few, an axe all deceitful, a wood cleaver weak. Begone, worthless weapon, with shaft smoke begrimed. A prince ill beseemed it, such presence of mind." Chapter 39. Kettle Blond comes out to Iceland. This had happened while Thorolf was away, that one summer a merchant ship from Norway came into Borgarfirth. Merchant ships used then commonly to be drawn up into rivers, brook mouths, or ditches. This ship belonged to a man named Kettle, and by name Blond. He was a Norwegian of noble kin and wealthy. His son, named Geir, was then of full age, was with him in the ship. Kettle meant to make his home in Iceland. He came later in the summer. Skallagrim knew all about him and offered him lodging for himself and his company. This Kettle took, and was with Skallagrim for the winter. That winter Geir, Kettle's son, asked to wife Thorun, Skallagrim's daughter, and the match was made. Next spring, Skallagrim showed Kettle to land above Olif's land, by White River, from Flokadale River mouth to Reykjadal River mouth, and all the tongue that lay between the rivers up to Red Gill, and all Flokadale above the slopes. Kettle dwelt at Thorandholt, Geir at Geir's Lythe. He had another farm in Reykjadal at up Rake River. He was called Geir the Wealthy. His sons were Blond Kettle and Thorgeir Blond. A third was Risa Blond, who first dwelt at Risa. Chapter 40 of Egil's and Skallagrim's Games. Skallagrim took much pleasure in trials of strength and games. He liked to talk about such. Ball play was then a common game. Plenty of strong men there at the time in the neighborhood, but not one of them is strong enough to match Skallagrim. He was now somewhat old in years. There was a man named Thor, son of Granny at Granasted, who was of great promise. He was then young. Very fond he was of Egil, Skallagrim's son. Egil often engaged in wrestling. He was headstrong and hot-tempered, but all had the sense to teach their sons to give way to Egil. A game of ball was held at White River Dale in the early winter, to which was a great gathering of people from all across the countryside of Iceland. There went many of Skallagrim's household to the game. Chief among them was Thor, Granny's son. Egil asked Thor to let him go with him to the game. He was then in his 7th winter. Thor let him do so, and Egil mounted behind him. But when they came to the play game, then the men made up sides for it. Many small boys had come there too, and they made up a game for themselves. For this also sides were chosen. Egil was matched to play against a boy named Grim, son of Heg, of Hegstead. Grim was 10 or 11 years old, and strong for his age. But when they played together, Egil got the worst of it, and Grim made all he could of his advantage. Then Egil got angry and lifted up the bat, and struck Grim, whereupon Grim seized him and threw him down with a heavy fall, and handled him rather roughly, and said he would thrash him if he did not behave. But when Egil got to his feet, he went out of the game, and the boys hooted and laughed at him. Egil went to Thor and told him what had been done. Thor said, "I will go with you, and we will have our vengeance on him." He gave into his hands and halberd that he had been carrying. Such weapons were then customary. They went where the boys' game was going on. Grim had now got the ball and was running away with it, and the other boys after him. Then Egil bounded upon Grim and drove the axe into his head, so that it at once pierced his brain. After this, Egil and Thor went away to their own people. The Mirror men ran to their weapons, and so did the other party. Olaf Holt with his following ran to help the Borgermen, who were thus far larger by number, and they parted without doing more. But hence arose a quarrel between Olaf and Heg. They fought at Loch's Fit by Grim's river. There were 7 men fell, but Heg was wounded to death, and his brother Kvig fell. But when Egil came home, Skallagrim said little about it. But Bera said Egil had in him the makings of a raider, and that it would be well soon, so he were old enough to give him a long ship. Then Egil made a stave. He said, "Thus counselled my mother, for me should they purchase a galley and good oars to go forth a roving. So may I, high standing, a noble bark steering, hold course for the haven, hew down many foemen." When Egil was 12 years old, he was grown so big that there were but few men that were that large and strong who could overcome him in games. In his 12th winter, he was often playing these games. Thor, Granny's son, was then 20 years old. He was very strong. As the winter wore on, it often chanced that 2 Egil and Thor were matched against Skallagrim. And once in the winter it so befell that there was a ball play at Borg, southwards in Sandvik. Thor and Egil were set against Skallagrim in the game, and he became weary before them, so that they had the best of it. But in the evening after sunset it began to go worse with Egil and his partner. Skallagrim then became so strong, he caught up Thor and dashed him down so violently that he was all bruised and at once got his bane. Then he seized Egil. Now there was a handmaid of Skallagrim's named Thorgerda Brock, who had nursed Egil when a child. She was a big woman, strong as a man, and of magic cunning. She said, "Dost thou turn thy shape-strength, Skallagrim, against thy own son?" Whereat Skallagrim let Egil loose, but clutched at her. She broke away and took her heels with Skallagrim after that. So went they to the utmost point of Digraness. Then she leapt out from the rock into the water. Skallagrim hurled after her a great stone, which struck her between the shoulders, and she never came up for air. The water there is now called Brocka Sound, but afterwards in the evening, when they came home to Borg, Egil was very angry. Skallagrim and everybody else were set at the table, but Egil had not yet come to his place. He went into the fire hall and up to the man who there had the overseeing of work and the management of monies for Skallagrim, and this man was most dear to him. Egil walked up and dealt him a death blow, then quietly went back to his seat. Skallagrim spoke not a word about it then, and for thereafter It was all quiet, but father and son exchanged no word, good or bad, for the entire winter. The next summer after this, Thorolf came out, as was told above, and when he had been in Iceland one winter, in the spring following, he made ready his ship in Braka Sound. But when he was quite ready, then one day Egil went to his father and asked him to give him an outfit. "I wish," said he, "to go out with Thorolf." Skallagrim asked if he had spoken at all on the matter with Thorolf. Egil said he had not. Skallagrim bade him do that first, and when Egil started the question with Thorolf, he said, "'Tis not likely that I shall take you abroad with me, if your father thinks he cannot manage you here in his house. I have no confidence for this, to take you with me to foreign lands, for it will not do to show there such temper as you do here." "Maybe," said Egil, "neither of us will go then." In the night came on a furious gale, a sou'wester. But when it was dark, and now flood tide, Egil came where the ship lay. He went out onto the ship, and outside the tenting, he cut asunder the cables that were on the seaward side. Then, hurrying back to the land by the bridge, he at once shot out it, and cut the cables that were upon the land. Then the ship was driven out into the firth. But when Thorolf's men were aware that the ship was adrift, they jumped into the boat. But the wind was too far strong for them to get anything done. The ship drifted over to Duck Isle, and on the islands there, but Egil went home to Borg. And when people got to know of the trick that Egil had played, the more part blamed it. Egil said he should before long do Thorolf more harm and mischief if he would not take him away. But when others mediated between them, and the end was that Thorolf took Egil, and he went out with him that summer. When Thorolf came on shipboard, at once taking the axe which Skallagrim had given into his hands, he cast it overboard into the deep so that it never more came up. Thorolf went his way in the summer, and his voyage sped well, and they came out to Hordaland. He at once stood northwards to Son. There it had happened in the winter that Brynjolf had fallen sick and died, and his sons had shared the heritage. Thord had Arland, the estate in which his father had dwelt. He had become a liegeman of the king and was made a baron. Thord's daughter was named Randvik, the mother of Thord and Helgi, this Thord being father of Ingridr, whom King Olaf had to wife. Helgi was father of Brynjolf, father of Sirk, Son, and Svein.